Hi guys, my name is Katie and I'm a pilot, and today we're talking about how I got through all of my flight training from zero to airline transport pilot, multi and single engine for under $35,000.
And you posted a video that ended up going viral, and a bunch of people commented asking you for this content, so you are obliging and going to throw it up for free on YouTube.
Yeah, so I'm really passionate about helping people get into aviation without getting $90,000 or $100,000 of loans and going through a horrible experience with a really negative flight school or anything like that. I feel like I had a really good experience with my flight training and I learned a lot along the way. So I just want to pass that along to the aviation community that I love.
Okay, so what is like the first thing somebody has to do as a student pilot to set themselves up to get to transport pilot without a ton of debt?
Okay, so the first thing that I would suggest would be to go through part 61 instead of part 141. So those are just the names of the different types of flight training you can do. Part 141 is more of a structured college type program where you have to do lesson 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on in order. So what that looks like is it's supposed to be a more standardized flight training process, so the FAA allows you to complete your licenses at a slightly lower hours minimum. For example, for a private pilot's license, you can take your check ride at 35 hours. People think that's a really good deal, so they're thinking that they're going to get done faster, it's better training. However, in reality, 141 is usually a lot more expensive, and you can imagine all the problems that arise if we have to do lesson 1, which is not consistent with the weather we have today, and we can't skip around. So in part 61, you have to meet 40 hours to get your private pilot's license, and your instructor can just tailor that flight training to you. So if we go out and it's like a lower ceiling, we can go do turns around a point, like a ground reference maneuver, landing, something like that. If we're in part 141 and we're on lesson 4, and lesson 4 needs a 6,000 foot ceiling, and we don't have that for 7 weeks because we're in the winter, you're just not flying that whole time.
Right.
So that's a huge problem.
And for 141, you're typically getting a degree out of it as well, right?
You can, so you can do it through a degree program, which would be like certain colleges that offer it. You still have to pay for the flight portions separately. So it's still on top of what a normal bachelor's degree would cost.
Is there more benefit to having a degree coupled with, like, if there's two people and one went 141 and there's one that went 61 and they're both applying for the same job, will a degree beat out hours or hours beat out a degree?
That's a really good question. The airline hiring industry is so different right now because we have a shortage of highly qualified pilots. So if you have two equal candidates and one of them has a degree from an aeronautical university and they have 141 training and everything else is the same, you could probably say that they could get hired faster. However, that's really not what happens with most applicants. Most applicants are not the exact same person. So somebody might interview better, somebody might have more volunteer experience. And what I have seen is, like, airlines and hiring don't really care if you went 141 or not. Right now, almost all of the major airlines have dropped the requirement for a bachelor's degree altogether. So it doesn't really matter.
Okay, so going back to step 1, it sounds like step 1, you have to decide if you're going to go 141 or 61 Cowboy. Obviously, I decided to go 61 Cowboy.
Yeah.
I'm not really interested in doing airlines or whatnot. It's more so to get the license in and kind of just go my own, color my own picture. I know for me specifically, and for your guys' information, I'm a student pilot. I'm right at like 40 hours. We were waiting on a check ride, and then we bought a house instead. So
yeah, life happened.
So that's where I'm at. Definitely just understanding the rendition of what 141 is like, and understanding where I'm, like, just the way that I intake information. There is no way that I could have dealt with that.
Yeah. So, and that's not to say 141 is bad. Like, there's pros and cons to both sides. You know what I mean? 141 is going to be more expensive. So, and the only real advantage of it that I would say is a significant advantage is when you get to ATP minimums. So ATP is Airline Transport Pilot license or rating, if you really want to stick on that point.
Yeah.
And what that means is basically this is your license to fly like an airliner, which is kind of what everybody's trying to get to. So for restricted ATP under 141, you only have to have, I believe, 1,000 hours. And then for ATP under part 61 you have to have 1,500. Which is probably at least a year on your
Yeah.
timeline of time building. So, but back to the other sub hours requirements, most private pilots, the national average to take their check ride is between 65 and 75 hours. So if you are ready at 35 hours, like that's extremely rare.
Right.
Most people are going through a 141 program and they're not taking a check ride at hours minimums anyway.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really pay off until you get to the restricted ATP.
Right. But you have a hack for building time for less money than most people, right? And you have that from before you even get your PPL.
It was right after the private pilot's license.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was really fortunate that I just kind of stumbled upon the light sport CFI route. So this is something that I just want to share the information with people, and if it helps you and it works for you, awesome. So basically what this is you can be a light sport flight instructor at 150 hours of total time. You only have to have either a private pilot's license or a sport license before that. So what I did is I got my private pilot's license, which I think I had like 75 hours when I took my check ride because I moved a lot and I like stopped and started, which is pretty normal for people. And at that point, this flight school told me, we will start giving you the lower rate that is basically the planes at cost in exchange for labor. So I wasn't necessarily being compensated to fly.
An individual with a student pilot's rating.
Yeah, whatever. People really care about that.
They can time build towards their PPL with a light sport though, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you can go and rent out one of these light sports typically at a lower cost because they cost less than the plane.
Yeah.
And you can time build for your PPL and then just take a PPL check ride with a CFI, correct?
Yeah, in a light sport.
Well, that's such a hack.
Exactly. So that's the other thing that people don't realize is like a light sport aircraft generally runs on MOGAS or avgas. So it's not on 100 low lead. The fuel is cheaper. They're maintained by a light sport A&P. So there's a lot of things that are a little less expensive. And we all know with certified aircraft, the moment it's the first certified aircraft, it's like, here's a Bolt and it's $400 because it's, for an airplane. So you're kind of in a world where everything is still safe, it's still maintained, it's still meeting FAA standards, but it's just cheaper.
So you can take your PPL in a light sport. So like the real hack would almost be to just buy a light sport.
Yeah.
How much cheaper, or what are a typical light sport airplane like?
So they're actually pretty expensive. Like, like the Technums, I think are like over $100,000 for
a brand new one.
A brand new one, yeah. But I mean,
$100,000. My buddy just bought a 182 for $250, and that was a 40-year-old plane.
Yeah. So it's a brand new airplane. Again, super nice glass cockpit. So I don't know. I think that it would make sense
for airplanes. It almost seems like that's really inexpensive. What about used light sports? What's the market like for that?
I don't know the prices on them off the top of my head.
I imagine if they're going for $100,000 brand new, though, that would probably be fairly cost effective.
Right. Yeah. So if you are, what I think would make a lot of sense is if someone wants to buy an airplane, you could buy the airplane and then have people train in it and you could just rent it to them and you can probably charge a little less than you would for like a 172, but people really get a good idea in your local community of like what the cheapest time builder is, So if people are looking for that, they're going to be renting it out quite a bit.
Plus, if you go with a 172 that has just a 6-pack in it and half the instruments don't even align, and then you have a brand new light sport that has all glass,
right.
I think people would actually pay the same amount for the light sport.
I mean, I have literally flown light sport aircraft across the country, like VFR. So, I mean, they're pretty solid airplanes nowadays, It's not the Piper Cub that we think of the past that didn't have any kind of instrumentation in it.
Yeah, and everyone knows Piper Cubs are garbage.
I love a Piper Cub. Don't talk shit on a Piper Cub. Like, who could do that? Basically, the real hack for the light sport CFI is you get your private pilot's license, you get to 150 hours, you take one more check ride, and then you're done paying for your flight training. And what I mean by that is, like, the flight school that I worked at, there were some instructors that were just light sport, like myself, and then there were some that were CFI airplane, full CFIs, if you will. Well, they're time building for the airlines too. So friends of mine like Andrew, who's at United right now, we would go fly after work, and I would pay for the plane at cost because I was an employee, and we would just go fly. We'd fly instrument approaches, we'd fly night flying. So I went and did like my instrument rating at literally minimum hours, 15 hours with a CFII, and took a check ride. And imagine how easy my full CFI check ride was when I had 700 hours of dual given at that point. So, you know, a lot of people don't realize like getting to the point of getting a commercial license is so hard and so expensive. And then you start making like $15 an hour or whatever it is. And that's where people, I think,
as a
really
CFI, traditional CFI.
Yeah, and I made $27 an hour, you know, as a light sport CFI at 150 hours without a commercial license, without an instrument rating, and it's fully legal. You know, this is from the FAA.
Right. So you could, I mean, if you were time building and you bought the plane, you would be able to rent that out and just accumulate all of the costs. You could rent the plane out and rent your services out at only 150 hours.
Yeah, absolutely. So
it's a good plan.
It's a pretty good option out there. And again, maybe not for everybody, but you know, it's airplane single engine land. So that's how it goes in your logbook. And it's just an airplane, just like if you were in a Piper Cub or something, like it goes towards your total time the same way.
So how did you go from your light sport CFI days to when you finally got your commercial? Like, what was that transition?
Yeah, so I was working full time as a light sport CFI, and in Florida there was more of a student base for light sport because there's aviation just huge in Florida. But also it was just because like there was a light sport school, so the community kind of knew about it.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of people in every aviation community that maybe are not in the place in their life where they want to go get a third class medical, but they still have a driver's license and they're still safe to fly, and they just want to, you know, fly in their retirement or whatever the case may be. So that's a big question that people have is like, well, how did you find students? And my thought on it is like, well, people kind of are out there once you put the news out there and, you know, somebody comes into a flight school and asks about maybe a 172 and hey, there's a cheaper option. Like that's kind of how we had students.
Yeah, and you don't even have to be a light sport student to time build. You can be a PPL student to hire out a light sport CFI and go time build in that.
Yeah.
Because your time, from what I understand, it all counts as the same thing.
Right. Yeah. So that was the other thing is like a lot of the students, you know, that I trained, they weren't sure yet if they wanted to become a private pilot or if a sport pilot would meet their needs. So they would get through about solo with me and then decide kind of which way they wanted to go. And if they wanted to become a private pilot, then they only need 20 hours with an authorized instructor, which was not me because I was a light sport instructor. So then they would just move on to an instructor, you know, in the same schoolhouse.
Right. But if somebody already had the 20 hours and they just needed to build time, could they get soloed in a light sport and build time in a light sport?
Yeah. There's not like private pilots like building time. That's not so much. It's normally after that where they want to get the.
Or if they just want to they want to practice their skills on a cheaper aircraft.
Sure. Yeah.
Like they solo and they need landings and they know that they suck at landings and they don't want to take the check ride until they nail it. So plus a light sport, it just seems like it would be an easier aircraft to take a check ride in.
Yeah, there's pros and cons for sure. Like the other thing I really liked about the light sports is like you do have to be stronger on stick and rudder skills because they're light, you know?
Yeah.
So a lot of people would come from a 172 and like they almost had to relearn how to land because you got to set that thing down light and it's going to bounce or, you know, jump around. So
jump around.
Yeah, I did private pilot's license, 150 hours, light sport CFI, and then I was working full time and I got, you know, I think 600 hours in a year or something like crazy like that. So during that time, I would go and train with my coworkers who were full CFIs, and I would get all my requirements done for my instrument rating. And then I would go wherever I wanted to take my check ride, get my one instructor, work with them, and just take my instrument rating check ride. I went and did like my commercial for, I think I did like maybe 10 hours and then took my commercial check ride. And then took my full CFI like the next day because I've already done all the maneuvers for the commercial. You know, it's just in a different seat.
Got it.
So it was really inexpensive because all of my time building was like, you need 50 hours of PIC cross country to take your instrument rating check ride. Well, I have that with students, you know, that I've been instructing as the PIC as an instructor.
So how much time did you have when you took your CFI?
So I took my commercial check ride and my full CFI, I think I was at 500 or 600 hours total time.
And at that point, what did you move on and go do?
So around that time, I was kind of ready to move on to a job that had like health insurance and all that kind of stuff, because I started learning to fly when I was like 25.
Yeah.
So for some people, they may be 19, but I was kind of like, all right, I want like to go to the
Benefits.
dentist and stuff, you know? So at that point, I got hired as a government contract flight instructor. So I worked teaching Air Force and Marine Corps pilots in initial flight training and screening for the Air Force in Pueblo, Colorado. So I moved on to like a real job, you know, and I had my CFI, I had my 100 hours of dual given, which was the minimum for that government contract.
Right. And how long did you do that?
I was there a little over a year. They're an awesome organization. And then during that time, you know, you always in aviation want to live below your means, because it's really a volatile industry. Things can change with the economy really quickly. So I kind of just had cash stacked up. And then I was able to, when COVID hit, I was able to go get my multi-engine commercial, and I just paid cash for it. I think I spent like $6,000 or something, because like multi-time is just expensive. It's just the way it goes. And then I got my MEI, which, you know, was another like $1,000 or $2,000 or whatever, just to take another check ride. So I kind of chipped away at things like really slowly, but it was productive because the whole time I'm time building, you know, the whole time I'm moving forward. I just
and you're being paid to time build.
Yeah. Like,
pretty much from PPL.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So after that, I went and I worked for a Part 135 operator. And again, just had money stashed up during that time. So I got my single engine ATP paid for by my employer, and then I did my multi-engine ATP as an add-on, and I just paid for it. And I think again, it was like $5,000. So that's $10,000 on top of a private pilot's license, which was probably $12,000. And then there's like another 10 grand in there of just like check rides and books and like, you know, 15 hours of dual given as a CF double. Like, so literally the whole thing, it took, you know, 4 years, probably 5 years, but the whole time I was flying and I wasn't like in my head just trying to get to an airline. That's not the route I took.
And you did it totally debt-free.
Totally debt-free, and the overall price tag was literally under $35,000.
Yeah, it just took you a little bit longer to get through it all.
Yeah, and I have CFI, CFII, MEI, ATP single engine, ATP multi-engine, commercial seaplane.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm commercial drone or whatever. It's like, for under 35 grand, like that's pretty good.
I mean, it's okay.
It's okay. But, you know, not the route for everybody. If someone really wants to get to a regional and then immediately, like, they know they want to be at an airline, maybe they want to go to, you know, XYZ, a big name flight school that claims that they'll get you through in like 6 months, which may or may not be a real thing. But, you know, that might be a better option for them. Maybe they just want to take the loans out. But most people really don't want to do that. And I've seen a lot of people commenting and asking questions about this. So that's why I just want the information out there so people can make an informed decision that's best for them.
So where would somebody go to be a light sport instructor?
Okay, so obviously like Florida and Arizona and Colorado are the flight training capitals of the US, which I would claim would probably be the flight training capitals of the world, because America leads in aviation.
Because America.
So those are really good places. However, like, we live in Idaho, and, you know, people think here it's like, oh, there's no flight training for light sports.
Because all of the schools are totally backed up.
Yeah.
And like people are 2 years in without instrument ready.
Yeah, like the 141 programs right now, like I know of people that are 2 years in when they were quoted that they will be done in 18 months and they only have a private pilot's license. I personally think that's like criminal.
Yeah, I mean, it took me a month to get to 40 hours.
And you were like you were ready for a check ride at 40, and we just couldn't find a DP.
I mean, thanks FAA.
We're working on that one. So I think that if you could go to in your local flight area, there has been a light sport plane at every single airport I have ever flown out of. So why not go to that owner and say, hey, you know, this is a chance for young aviators to start working in aviation. We're not starting a flight school. This is about giving people a path into being a pilot.
So what you're saying is you could go to somebody that owns a light sport, suggest that you kind of partner with them, give them the rental fee, and then you just take the fee it is to be your CFI.
Yep.
What kind of, I know you have to have a annual and 100 an hour. Do you have to do that for light sport as well?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
but
so
it doesn't have to be a ATP.
actually, I don't know if you have to have 100 hour for light sport. I'm not sure. I'd have to look at that because I'm not on the maintenance side of things.
Okay.
But that is a good question. However, I do know that it does not have to be from an AMP.
That was
a
it.
light sport mechanic is
Yeah.
allowed to do maintenance on that. And I think that there is, I believe it's a 2-week course that they go to become a certified light sport mechanic. And then they just have to be overseen by an AMP, is my understanding of that part of it.
Do you know how much that light sport mechanic course is?
The number that I heard was about $5,000, but that was in like 2018. So I don't know exactly what it is now.
Got it.
But it's definitely cheaper than becoming a full AMP. I
Right.
do know people that wanted to become an AMP and they started as a light sport mechanic and then they apprenticed, they did the apprenticeship route
Right.
under a full AMP and they worked as a light sport mechanic and then were able to take their AMP check ride and all that. And that's what I love about aviation is I feel like if someone is smart and self-disciplined and works hard, they should be rewarded. And what I really hate about the flight training industry right now is that's not happening. Like people are going into flight schools or community colleges or whatever and being told, if you come in and you study and you pass your stuff, we'll get you done in 12 months. We'll get you done in 18 months for this price tag. And it's 2 years later and they're out of money and they have a private pilot's license. And it's like, that's wrong, you
Right.
know?
Criminal.
That's predatory.
So is there any parting pearls of wisdom that you want to leave the audience off with?
So I know that the rules of light sport CFR are really complicated and I have been through them. So I've been putting together a PDF guide, like an ebook that really breaks it down for people. I think that's really valuable. It's all in one place and you can just look at that and say, what am I authorized to do? What are the rules? Where can I look? So I'll be putting that in my Instagram. That's coming out in like 2 weeks because it's taking me forever to put it together.
I mean, you've been working on that for quite a few months now, right?
But I just really want this information in one place for people, So I'm putting that together to help people. Again, this is just info for you guys so you can make informed decisions that are best for you. And hopefully it helps you get into aviation in a way that you don't hate it, when you're 3 years into it, because we hear that all the time and it makes me sad.
Yeah. What are some next level things that you want to attack to help aviators out there?
Okay, so the light sport guide is one. The light sport CFI guide is one. The other thing is I know a lot of pilots that have had like back injuries or they get into aviation and they gain weight because they're sitting down all day and their brain's working, so they're tired, but they're not active.
And they probably they're gone all the time, right?
Yeah, weird schedules, circadian rhythms are all off, eating processed food.
Yeah, they're eating this stuff that's available to them at airports.
Right, so I'm putting together a fitness guide for that as well, which will help people because I'm also passionate about like health and fitness and that whole thing.
And just keeping people because you're saying if they have back problems from sitting all day and they're getting overweight, well, that's a sedentary lifestyle. They're not going to be able to maintain that. So they might struggle or they might grind to get to the point to be an ATP and then they're only able to be there for 4 or 5 years because their body can't handle it.
Yeah, super important. I mean, all the professional pilots know like protecting your health and keeping your medical is like really important. So I think the number one thing we can do is like take ownership of our choices of what we're feeding ourselves and what we're doing activity wise. It can be really hard specifically for professional pilots because they're in hotels and they're working backside of the clock and all this weird stuff. But I've done that and I've lived that and I work like nights right now. I work 84 hours in my work week and we've figured it out. So I just want to pass that on to people too.
Cool. And you put out daily contact all the time. So where can people find you?
So Instagram at Pilot Katie, Kaity, TikTok and YouTube is the same. And I'm just trying to put the info out there. I absolutely love aviation and I just want to share what I've learned with